Talk with the Nation, presented by the Honorable McKeeva Bush, returns on Vibe FM.
Good evening and welcome back to Talk with the Nation here on Vibe 98.9. We're going to be taking phone calls at the top of the hour, and we'd like you to give us a call at 946-9898. You can also join us by facebook.com/Talk with the Nation, or you can tweet us at TWTNKY. That's TWTNKY. Again, joining me in the studio, if you're just tuning in, our listeners out there, we have joining us in the studio the Honorable Minister of Education, Mr. Rolston Anglin, and Boddentown MLA, Mr. Dwayne Seymour. We're talking about, I would say, the most important subject of all, education in the Cayman Islands, educating our young people, our students, our children here to make sure that they can be successful adults later on in life. Before we went to the break, we were talking about the Cayman Islands Further Education Program, our center, popularly known amongst young people as the SciFEC program, which is a year 12 program here on the island. It's newly introduced as part of Minister Anglin's and the government's reform program for education here. Before we went to the break, we were talking a little bit about the program, but I've asked Mr. Anglin to please go ahead and further explain, or even Mr. Seymour to further explain to our listeners out there who may not know about this program in particular and need the facts and the details. Mr. Seymour, can you further explain to our listeners exactly what TFET as well as the SciFEC program is all about, please?
Well, thank you, Donna. And as to SciFEC, definitely I have a very intimate experience with SciFEC. My son actually went to SciFEC just a year ago, and definitely he had failed some of his subjects in John Gray, and then he moved over to SciFEC, and math was one of them. As you know, that is a weak area in Cayman for some reason, and I sent him out also to get some additional tutoring and so forth. But now it's I definitely endorse SciFEC because it has gave my son an opportunity to, and now he is at UCCI,
right?
And definitely a lot of people. Some people that I hear, they don't really understand what SciFEC is about, and they frown on it.
Right.
And I gotta say, that this gave my son a second chance, and I'm so happy that SciFEC was there to give my son that second chance to be able to go on to University College of the Cayman Islands. I think some people are in denial, and some parents are in denial,
right,
and think that their kids or their children shouldn't go to SciFEC because they feel like they should have got it the first time because they've followed them all this time, didn't realize they were weak in math or whatever. I think people just need to follow their kids, go to the PTAs, go to the HSA meetings,
right,
meet with the principal, try to understand what the system is about.
Correct.
Before we frown on it.
Right, exactly. Well, I can speak from personal experiences as well, and I was sharing with you and Minister Anglin during the break that I think it's a wonderful program. My daughter has just started the SciFEC program, and she too, excuse me, didn't do so well in the area of math, like a lot of her fellow classmates. We'll get back into the whole math area and talking about that in just a little bit with the minister. But I think it's a wonderful program, and really, if there's a lack of understanding, people just need to understand that this is a great opportunity for students out there who didn't do as well as we may have expected them to get a second chance, because previous years before, they fell through the cracks. And we're seeing the results of them falling through, the students who fell through the cracks in society today, and what it's really, really done. So, and of course, nothing happens overnight. It's going to take a while for these types of programs to be in place and to be successful. But I truly believe, again, from personal experience and what I've seen so far with reform in education, that, years down the road, we're going to be the better for it. And I think that the government is on the right track, if I may say so, from a personal level. Okay, Minister Anglin, let's talk a little bit more about the reform program and how the plans are actually moving forward as far as SciFEC being one of them, and other changes that have been made that are going ahead successfully.
Well, just listening to yourself and Mr. Seymour is a real testament to why this reform agenda is so important. When I think back on my short time ago when I was in high school, and I think about the numbers of friends that I have who only wish they'd probably give a right and a left arm
Yes.
to have had SciFec when they were in high school.
Right.
This is the public begged and asked for years, how do we incorporate second chances in our system? How do we get a good system of resets? Whilst doing it, if I had come to the public and said, we're going to put you on work experience, and then all you're going to do is try and do come in for some tutoring and do resets. That in and of itself would have been a help. But we went even further as a government, and we said, you know what? Let us find a range of options in terms of subjects that can give our children a qualification that delivers education in a slightly different way, so that they are able to also not only do some resets, but also build up their portfolio. Because what kids are building up now is a portfolio of experiences and passes and successes.
Right.
If we're not getting our kids into the habit of being successful, and if we're not giving them avenues for success, we're setting them up for failure. That's the bottom line.
Right.
And BTECs are fully accredited, but BTECs are fully recognized in the United Kingdom. So this isn't about us making up something in-house that that isn't transportable, that isn't something that other schools recognize. Right. We've also, after long discussions, the University College has internally its own system of assessment that gives credit in terms of acceptance for BTECs. Now, they still insist on you having your math and English if you want to go straight on their associate's program, and the University College is quite right to do that.
Right.
That is an international standard that is in place that the country simply have to accept. Any system that is going to be credible have to have certain hallmarks. And a key hallmark is literacy and numeracy. Let us look at the United States. The principal SAT, not SAT2s, but SAT is English and math. That's what you take to be able to get as one of the key access points and access methods to university. Right. And so for us not to recognize how important those two subjects are, I think is really, we're missing the point. And so SciFec allows a student to pick a BTEC, and you were telling me your daughter, I think, is going to be doing the health and social care,
right? She wants to be a nurse.
Which is excellent, because it's a partnership that we've developed actually with the HSA.
Right.
That is one of those programs that as we grow at SciFec, and as we get more experience, and as we continue to be able to improve, I see that as one of the key offerings. And in fact, I think that we should. My vision is that we get to the point where we can offer about 2 or 3 BTECs in the healthcare field. Why? Healthcare is one of the most immune industries from recession. And it's very simple.
It is.
we all are living longer through medicine. Yep. We all get sick. We all need to access healthcare. Right.
And when recession is there, and as a fact, we get more stressed out, so we need the doctors and nurses more, don't we?
You look globally, the only area or the biggest area of growth in jobs globally during the last 8 years have been healthcare. The most immune industry in the United States has been healthcare. We also just broke ground in the Shedder Hospital. So the government is planning in the background for trying to meet the needs of tomorrow by planning today. So that's going to be important. Then we're going to also introduce the nursing program at UCCI. And so you start to see that government is actually thinking very strategically about how we're going to deliver education products to our country. The last thing I want to really say on SciFec that I think Mr. Seymour and yourself spoke well to, but I really want to repeat it and underpin it. This isn't about the end of a journey. High school is the beginning of another phase of life.
Correct.
And so to give our children a place that they can go, get another qualification, get some work experience, and at the same time have an opportunity for resets so that they can build up that portfolio of passes and get to wherever their dreams are at is crucially important if we are going to get education right. The other thing that's going to be that is a long-term vision is that eventually we're going to have a multitude of evening offerings at SciFec, so that we can get more and more adults coming in. So you might have an adult who is in the construction field and has always just been there and only got experience. We're going to be rolling out a BTEC in construction. Right. How wonderful it will be for that person to now come back and get a formal qualification to underpin what they're doing, to put the theory behind it, behind the practice. And really, if we're going to build as a nation, it has to be about lifelong learning.
Right.
And so what we're doing at primary, at early years, primary and high school is very important, but we're also having great successes about what we're trying to do at tertiary. But we get to that sort of, I guess, at the end of the program.
I know you don't want to forget the program that Mr. Roy Borden has up there at the UCCI, which is a pre-college. And you probably want to talk about that also.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Mr. Borden and the reforms at UCCI have been outstanding.
Okay.
And so not only have we given second chances at high school, but then we've added yet another opportunity, which is that sometimes you still have a child who's gone through the system, but still haven't gotten all the base requirements to be able to access tertiary.
Right.
And so what Mr. Borden and his team has put in place is a pre-college studies program that if you can sit the entrance exam for that and pass it, you get to do Math 99 and English 99.
Oh, wow.
I think they even offer a 98. But what it does is it steps down the expectations, clearly accepting that you're not doing full tertiary studies as yet.
Right.
But giving you, again, a second chance to access tertiary education.
Right.
And so you take the two of those interjections into our system, and you start to see how government is being very thoughtful about how we give the widest possibilities to access tertiary education for all.
Wow. Well, I know that we did a report the other day. There was a report out about the statistics on the latest percentage of passes at high school level. And I think 4 years ago, it was at 27%. Now it's almost at 50%, somewhere around 45 plus percentage. How has you and your team and the government been able to achieve the leaps in bounds and success as far as education is concerned? I mean, some people might look at it and say, "Oh, that's only 20-something% more," but it's a feat that not many countries can really boast about.
Right. The stats that you're talking about, Donna, is an important measure. One of the key measures of any British-based system is how many people come through your system that are achieving 5 or more what we call level 2 passes of what we would have called O levels or the equivalent of O levels.
Right.
In 2007, 27% were achieving that mark. By 2008, it was 30. By 2009, it was 38%. By 2010, it was 39%. And then by 2011, we jumped up to 45%.
Wow.
This year, we're looking in our government system that we're going to be right at the 50% mark.
Wow.
And that makes me extremely proud, because this is a testament to a lot of hard work by our teachers.
Right.
A lot of wonderful leadership in our high schools. And certainly reforming our approach to external exams and recognizing that we had really become too laissez-faire. Because a lot of people don't realize a lot of the shifts that had happened in the system in terms of, I can remember when my sister and my brothers went to school, there was this very strict concept called prep.
Right.
Okay? By 1988, when I was going to sit my exams, mandatory prep had disappeared.
Yeah.
It was not in high school. And I can tell you, I was sent home as a young 15-year-old, 16, I just turned 16, to actually go on study leave and be mature enough and have enough support at home to do all my studies and be prepared. That's scary.
Was this a mock?
That's extremely for my finals after my mocks.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that was scary. So in your days, I'm sure, Mr. Seymour, you still had mandatory mock, mandatory prep.
Yeah.
So you did your mocks in February, March, and that sort of stuff, in January, February, and then there was a very strict system. What I can say is that under the leadership of people like Ms. Lynette Monteith, our principal at John Gray High School, they have really put in place interventions where they have some sessions that are mandatory for kids to come back in during their study break, optional sessions.
Right.
So if a kid is struggling, you can let the parents know, look, bring your child in so that, yes, you get off a study leave in May and your exam may be in June, but you still have all these opportunities to support you during your preparation.
Right. Clifton Hunter was doing the same thing as well.
Right. And so it's really been about that real focus on accepting that as a system, it's not good enough to say parents and students, get on with it when you're on study leave, come and show up for your external exams. We're accountable and we should be supporting their children right up until the day they come and sit down and the invigilator says, you can now write.
Okay.
We have to be a key part of that. And I think really it's about expectations. I think one of the things that I have gotten criticism about is my stance on standards, being unwavering when it comes to standards, and saying to people, don't shoot at standards. Lowering standards isn't going to bring success.
Exactly.
What brings success is having reasonable world-class standards and supporting our children to reach them.
Right.
That's what brings success. And so ultimately, I can say that my colleagues, I mean, and I know sometimes, they get the complaints and then they come and they say, well, Rol, can you explain this? And I give them the rationale. Yeah. And I can say that my colleagues have stood with me shoulder to shoulder on insisting that we have world-class standards that we're going to aspire to. And now let us go out as a community in supporting our families and our children so that they can reach those standards.
Okay, you wanted to say something, Mr. Seymour?
Yeah, well, definitely. What I got to say about it is, I've had a lot of parents who have approached me over the last week in terms of grades and standards and, why isn't their child going on to A-level studies or UCCI? And, they seem like very valid questions. And we wrote down information, took the information from them, and some of these kids had like 7 passes, good grade 2 passes, a lot of A's, and that's what I talked about earlier in terms of parents taking the time and teachers taking the time to try to explain the systems so that they don't get this false hope.
Right.
And you think, oh, my child is bright. But you didn't understand the system. You didn't understand the process and the results, what it translates into, and what does it mean. What does a B.Tech pass mean? How many grades is that?
Right. And
these are the things that we definitely need to do a better job from both sides. Parents need to get more interested, and the system, whether it's the ministry, the department, teachers, all need to put a better emphasis in trying to get people to understand the actual system that we have in place. Me and Donna actually graduated together. You didn't know that. But that was back then. But I must say, in looking at the system now that Minister Anglin has so eloquently created with the help of his ministers and support staff, back then, Donna,
I wish we had it.
Let me tell you, it was easier to fall through the cracks back then than it is now, as we see that it saved our children.
It's true. It's true. Very valid points, Mr. Seymour and Mr. Anglin. We're going to take a break now here on Talk with the Nation. And this is the kind of forum that we need to be able to discuss issues like this so that our listeners out there are more educated and informed about what's going on in the country and how it all happens and gets to where it gets to. All right, we'll be back with more on Vibe 98.9 in just a few minutes. Just a reminder, though, that this is a live call-in show. We're going to be taking calls from you in just a bit. Again, that number to call, 946-9898. Also, you can join us by Facebook if you have your computer in front of you at facebook.com/Talk with the Nation, or just tweet us at TWTNKY. It's Talk with the Nation. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
What's affecting our nation? This is Talk with the Nation, presented by the Premier, the Honorable McKeeva Bush on Vibe FM.
Back to Talk with the Nation here on Vibe 98.9. With me in the studio is the Honorable Minister of Education, Mr. Rolston Anglin, and Boddentown MLA, Mr. Dwayne Seymour. If you're just tuning in, we are talking about education. We've gone through a lot of talking about the SciFec program, as well as the progress that the government has made since being elected back into the Legislative Assembly and control of the Legislative Assembly some 3 years and 3 months ago. And they have made a lot of reform in education, as well as many success stories, and things have grown in leaps and bounds. One of the areas of concern, though, and we were talking about this as well throughout the show, is the area of mathematics and our students being able to grasp it. And Mr. Seymour and I were talking about this, and why is it that it's so difficult for many of us to grasp the subject of mathematics? Mr. Seymour, and you kind of summed it up in I think about 6 words. Can you repeat those words for us?
Yeah, well, as I was saying, Donna, there's not a lot of people that I meet on a daily basis that jump up and say, I love math.
Right.
But as I was saying, with the system that the minister is now putting in place, gives you such a better opportunity from primary straight through.
Right.
Than back then when we had that. I mean,
Right.
you can remember, a lot of people used to say all the time, at John Gray or Cayman Islands High School at the time, they were just teaching you how to pass exams.
Yeah, exactly.
No knowledge.
It's
right?
true. It's true.
The thing about math, right? And I must admit, math wasn't my favorite subject.
Mine either.
I was a writer. I've always been a writer.
Me too.
Up to write poems and essays.
Me too.
But if you start wrong, if you get the concept wrong, you're going to end wrong with math. And that's why, and then you just keep doing it wrong, and you just never get it. The older you get, the harder it is to
grasp.
You got to start loving math from you were very young, from your primary school.
Right.
To be able to appreciate it when you get later, because you start to not even have the patience to want to understand math when you get older, because you already made up your mind, that is something I don't like.
Right.
So if you start wrong, you're going to end wrong.
Right. And I think those are some new famous words for all of us around here. Mr. Anglin, you'd like to add some things to that as well, because we were talking about mathematics and what the government is doing to reform the whole idea of teaching better mathematics. And one of the things that I pointed out to you was that not everybody that teaches the subject actually is good at teaching the subject.
Well, and I think that's something that we have to acknowledge.
Right.
I think you can't hide behind excuses. Our results have not been good enough. What I think a lot of people don't appreciate is that regionally, our results have not been good enough. I'm not going to have an essay on reporting and how some countries internationally, including in our region, actually report. But one thing I can say in Cayman is that we are very honest about how we report. In other words, we report on our full cohort. In other words, we don't say, oh, well, if you went to SciFec, we're not going to include those students and then only look at the other students and say that we have a 55% or a 60 or 70% pass rate in math. And this may be shocking to some who listen, but there are other countries out there who do that. So they do not include their tech students, for example. So if you have a country that streams,
right,
and let's just use a simple number, there was going to be 100 students exit their education system in 2012. And let's just say 55 of those students will end up going on to went to a trade school or technical school.
Right.
When they count their percentage pass, so only 45 went the academic route, let's say. And of those 45, 30 passed.
Okay.
They may very well report that 66% of their cohort passed math.
Wow.
Ignoring the fact that 45 were put on a different track. Some governments have used the logic to say, well, if we streamed them and didn't put them in that track, they couldn't have passed, so we shouldn't put them in our statistics. We don't do that in Cayman. What we do is we try to get every single person through, but we also report then on our full cohort.
Okay.
We say what our results are for every single child, and account for every single child in our system. That really is truth and honesty in education, is truth and honesty in reporting.
Right.
And that is something that I believe we should brag about. And so whilst our numbers are low, and they are far from where any of us should feel comfortable with, I can say that when we compare ourselves, we're not as bad off compared to others as we might otherwise think.
Right.
Having said that, that's still not good enough. What are we doing? We have introduced a really robust math recovery program.
Okay.
We've given specific training to our teachers. We've given specific training also to a number of our support aides in our classrooms who can actually then be able to assist the teachers and ensure that we're not having those children who are not getting it, as Mr. Seymour said at the beginning, continuing to fall and fall behind further and further and further. So our primary math recovery program is one that I believe is going to reap great rewards down the line.
Right.
The other thing that we're doing, which is much more systemic, is we're developing a primary leadership math program, where we're going to every single school and we are getting the most skilled math practitioners in those schools to take part in the program, where they're going to now go back and be the lead teachers in math in their schools, to not only assist some of their colleagues, but to also really lead the reform agenda.
Okay.
And in my mind, that's hugely important for us down the line.
Right.
Mr. Seymour said it, if you get it wrong in the beginning, you're going to get it wrong at the end. And so we are making sure that what we put in place at primary level is hugely important. But that's not good enough, obviously, for a parent whose child is now in high school.
Right.
And so we're also doing some robust interventions at high school.
Okay.
And trying to ensure that we clearly understand what is happening at the chalk face with math. Looking at the results is one thing. We have a math specialist for the first time in our system who has actually gone into each of our high schools, observed lessons, tested students himself,
Okay.
and are now working with our lead teachers or subject leaders in math to ensure that we really lift up the teaching standard at high school to an appropriate level. And I can say that our teachers have really embraced him.
Okay.
Because he came under a clear mandate. You are here to be a part of the team and be a part of a solution. And so taking that mandate and that mindset and being collaborative with our teachers hasn't seen him as this threatening figure who's going to, quote unquote, come in and tell them what to do or show them up. And so it's really been important, the work that he's done. The one thing that I'm going to ensure is that we are very, very clear that we need to put much more emphasis in SciFec.
Okay.
Because it is a second chance.
Right.
And during that second chance year, we must be putting our very, very best foot forward to support our children, to ensure that especially for those, because I mean, if you look at our grades, we got so many children who got a grade 4.
Yeah.
Which
That
tells
was
me
just right at-
how many of them were so
Close to
close at passing.
Yeah.
And I have said for a long time that if you show me a child, even 5, but in particular a child who got a grade 4, man, with intervention and support, I am confident we can probably get 60, 70, 80% of them
Right.
up to at least that all-important grade 3, so they can
Yeah.
get that qualification in math, because that qualification in math is hugely important.
It is.
I'm always surprised when I hear people say, oh, my child wants to do X, Y, Z. Why is math important? Math is important because literacy and numeracy are fundamental to life, to learning, and to success.
Right.
And we must have a clear base for that.
Speaking of literacy, and I'm going to come back to you in a few minutes, Mr. Seymour. Speaking of literacy, at one point, just a few years back, our literacy levels were really, really high, particularly amongst our young men, our young boys. I mean, there are men in our society now who are in their early 20s that literally can't read, you know, and for a country of our caliber and you know,
unacceptable.
It's totally unacceptable. I mean, you heard of these things happening back in the days, you know, some 40 years ago. There may have been some people that fell through the cracks because of, you know, technology wasn't available and many other things weren't available. But these days it's totally unacceptable. But how are the literacy rates looking now, some 3 years later?
Well, certainly we see some very interesting trends in terms of where our children are at, but actually breaking literacy down. Because is being literate the ability to read, to pick up this bottle and actually read the contents? Or is literate the ability to take a novel and read a page, understand,
comprehend
the humor, understand when the author is
comprehension
is going off on a slightly different angle? Is it the ability to then comprehend, understand, and actually think through and logically make assessments? And I can say to you, and this is something that we want to be very, very careful with.
Okay.
A lot of countries have some staggering statistics on literacy, but those statistics are very misleading.
Okay.
Because they aren't about understanding, they aren't about the ability to comprehend, they are literally about the capacity to pick up paper and read it. And so one of the things that we really focused on in our catch-up literacy program, we've had our catch-up literacy program, we've had our level literacy intervention, and we've had our corrective reading programs. And so if you think about those three strands, you automatically see that what we've been focusing on is understanding where each child is and trying to address their needs. So for the child who it is just about reading, they're just not reading enough, we have put in place a very robust corrective reading program.
Okay.
And that is something that that I'm very happy about. We've had kids who just weren't having great enough comprehension. And so we've had to put in our level literacy intervention program to assist them. And so ultimately, our pass rate at English is obviously much higher than math.
Right.
It still isn't as high as I want it to be.
Okay.
And it's not as high as I think N.K. Mannion should want it to be.
Okay.
But I think that we're making good strides in literacy. I certainly was encouraged when I looked at the data across our primary schools between last year and this year, when we've actually now assessed our children and seen exactly where they're at, and we've seen some good gains. And in talking to our principals, and that's ultimately where I draw a lot of credible data from. They have said, look, these interventions have worked, and what we've done is we've provided new resources in the school year and new opportunities to really roll these programs out even more in the upcoming school year in terms of intensifying our efforts in our catch-up literacy, our level literacy intervention, and our corrective reading programs to ensure that we're really supporting our kids. Because as we all know, if you can't read and comprehend, how are you going to solve the word problem in math?
Exactly.
Definitely, Minister, and that's why I support you so, and every move that you're making in terms of especially early childhood learning, because everything stems from getting it right. At the very young age, comprehension.
Yes.
If you don't know what Gene is doing to the dog, if you can't comprehend that by just looking at the picture. And then even verbally saying it or otherwise, the same with comprehension, with math, everything. And it's just, I mean, if we want to even do a segue on this and just say, let's use football, right? If we have, do you think that those Cristiano Ronaldos and all those guys learned to play football when they became an adult?
No.
It was the good training that they got when they were very young, the
formative
technical
years.
skills. And this leads me to ask the minister a question. Because speaking of football, if a coach doesn't do well with a team, then the board fires them, But we do know that teachers are not that easy to pick up and to replace. What do we do now if we find out that we have a teacher that's been flagged for not doing as well as they could do? Do we have a system in place?
Minister Anglin?
I really
I can
don't
speak from
know,
personal
really.
experience myself. I've seen what happens, but I think he needs to explain.
No, that's a very ticklish
Need to put
point.
you on the
But
spot.
no. Listen. When we have these frank and open discussions and honest discussions, we can't skirt and shy away from the big issues, and that's a huge issue. And I thank Mr. Seymour for asking that. That's a huge important issue. I've made it very clear to our principals that a key part of their job in school improvement is assessing teachers. We should support our teachers and give them every opportunity for success with professional development opportunities, with coaching, team teaching opportunities. But ultimately, I am not going to accept, and I've said this to the chief officer, and obviously administratively she's responsible in the ministry. But from a policy standpoint, I cannot accept a system that simply says that, if a person's been with us for X number of years, then they ought to just continue to be renewed in terms of a contract or continue to be employed in our system. Our children's learning must come first. A lot of people get shocked, but I like to describe it this way. Schools are about learning. If learning isn't happening in a school, then you might as well shut it down.
Right.
There's not a school on the face of this earth that was open today in which there wasn't teaching. There's not a school that would have been open in Cayman or any other place in which there wasn't teaching.
Right.
But how much learning was taking place?
Right.
It's the learning that matters.
Yeah.
And so there has to be accountability and responsibility on all sides. And I can certainly say that our principals have been under a very clear mandate that they must ensure that a key part of their job is being completely open and honest and about putting their children first, their school first, and ensuring that there's no buddy systems and these sorts of things that I continue to hear about. Oh, well, this one protects that one protects the other one, that one's a good friend. And I've said to them, we must be about being honest, and we must be about having the very, very best and most capable people at the front of our classrooms.
All right, Minister Anglin, we're going to take a break right now. Please rejoin Talk with the Nation in just a few minutes here on Vibe 98.9. We'll be right back.